So after playing the guitar for a really long time at this point, I wanted to try and make a few videos that show how I think of music now compared to how I understood music when I was starting out. And I hope it helps you to get deeper into the music. And I think it's going to help you understand the guitar better. And if I had to sum up what I'm going to try and talk about, I would say one way of talking about it is that not all notes are created equal. In other words, you can have a diagram of a scale like the pentatonic scale. And I remember learning that when I was a teenager and just having a diagram, and that was it. I just practiced it by running it up and down over and over and over again. And that, gets your fingers used to it, but it doesn't teach you how to be musical with it. And so as you learn more and more, you learn licks and phrases and ways to play that scale. And one thing that differentiates a lick from just running a scale up and down is that you might play a sequence, and what determines what you emphasize and where you stop and what order you play them in. That basically is based on your knowledge of the role the different notes play in the scale. So not all notes are created equal. So for instance, in this A minor pentatonic scale, I would say the most important note is the A, the root note. And that's why a lick that starts and ends on A is going to have more musical sense to it than a lick that is maybe more random or more mechanical. And so that would be an example where all those notes are important, all those notes are part of the scale, but it really, really matters that you know where the A notes are. You could also think of it as, let's say you didn't know the guitar real well and you didn't want to make a mistake. Well, what's your safest note if the song's in the key of A? Probably A. Not over every chord, but if it was a blues song, you could get a lot of mileage out of just staying on that A and then venture out from there, Let's imagine you only knew the top three notes of the scale, for these three notes. Well, just hang on that A. And you can kind of, that can be your home base and your safe place, right? Is, your safe playing the root note. All right, so anyhow, that's just a slight demonstration of the place I'm trying to help you arrive at, which is knowing the notes is great, but the deeper level is why are you playing particular notes and what role does each note play? And like we were just saying, in the key of A, obviously A is the most important note. And so it sounds kind of elementary, but it's not actually that easy to find all the A notes on the guitar because the guitar is not laid out like the piano where everything's nice and linear. And if you figure out the pattern for where the A note is on the piano in relation to the black keys, then you're set. It always looks the same. The guitar is not like that at all. The guitar is kind of like 6 pianos, and they're all offset from each other. And so I think it's actually kind of a task to get to where you can play, for instance, an A note all over the guitar. If you can already do that, that's great. And if you can't, I think it's a very, very worthy goal to set for yourself. And so I'm going to try and show you how I visualize that and what I think is the best way to accomplish that first goal. So basically, when we talk about playing a note all over the neck, a single note, A for instance, we're talking about octaves because we have an A here, open 5th string, right? And then the 12th fret marks the octave. So that's our next A note, and our ears hear that as the same note, only higher. So A and A, an octave higher. I'll take a little side detour into the math for 1 second. If you picture this vibrating at 1 frequency, this is twice that frequency. All right, so each time you double the frequency, you go up an octave. And a good rule of thumb to remember is that simple ratios equal strong intervals. Okay, an interval being the distance between two notes. So this is an interval. From this A to this A is an interval called an octave. And this note is vibrating at twice the frequency of this note. And so you have a 1 to 2 relationship. One note and the other note is the double of that. It's twice that. Very simple ratio. You can also look at it as a fraction. On the guitar, we're splitting the string in half to get this octave. So that's a pretty simple fraction. Cutting something in half equals a very strong interval, the octave. So the very first thing to know is that the 12th fret marks the octave. So for any given open string, that's where your octave is going to be. And you can add 12 to anything. So for the 3rd fret, 12 plus 3 is 15. 15th fret is going to be the octave above that. So that's great if you're working on individual strings, but playing on individual strings is not the most practical thing to do, so we want to start finding octaves all over the place. So the 6th string is always going to be one place to find the lowest note you can play of any given note. Now, in this case, the 5th string is also the same A note, but let's start on the 6th string. So we've got this A note on the 6th string. How do we play an octave above that without leaving this position? So if the note you're starting with is on the 6th string, the thing to remember is skip a fret, skip a string. So what I mean by that is skip from the 6th string to the 4th string, so that's hopping over a string, and then skip from the 5th fret to the 7th fret. And there's your A. And it's very comfortably played with your 1st finger and your 3rd finger to play the 2 A notes. Okay? And you can just take that around and, for any given note, that note skipping a string and skipping a fret away is the octave. You can play this harmonically by muting the 5th string with the tip of your 1st finger and play it as a chord shape, as a Wes Montgomery, Jimi Hendrix, Django Reinhardt, 3 guitar players that used octave shapes a lot. So let's build on this. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to visualize this. This is the first method. Swap your 3rd finger out for your 1st finger. So you're playing the 7th fret, 4th string. The next octave is going to be skip a string, skip 2 frets. So in other words, from the 4th string, 7th fret, we're going to the 10th fret, 2nd string. Play that with your pinky. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. We have this, then we have this. So this note is an octave above this note. This note is an octave above this note. This note is 2 octaves above this note. You can also hop your 1st finger like this. Okay, so that gives us a nice 6 fret, long diagonal way to access 3 A notes. So this is also going to help you learn the neck, because if you know this is A, then you know this is A, and you know this is A. You're going to start to be able to find those A notes faster. Okay, let's go back to, okay, that's the first shape. The exact same shape repeats on the 5th string. Let's go to the open 5th string. That's an A. Now if I skip a fret, skip a string, that's going to take me to the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. And then if I skip a string, skip 2 frets, pinky on the 5th fret of the 1st string. So, okay. So now that gives you another 6 fret long diagonal that follows the exact same fingering as the other one. And here's how they link up. So I'm starting down here. I end up with my pinky on the 5th fret. The next pattern starts on the same fret, but you drop down to the 6th string. Okay, so I'll do that again. And then you're going to skip a fret and go to the 5th string, and you're going to be back to the pattern again. So spend some time with that. 2 different patterns. One starts on the 6th string, one starts on the 5th string. They overlap here. This this one ends here and the other one starts here, and then there's a 1 fret space in between them where the next one begins. That's one way to find the unique notes of any given note. Let me show you another way that's a little more practical, maybe for sort of day-to-day playing. And this one's based on the caged system. So if you're familiar with the caged system, it's a way of organizing things using the beginner kind of chords you learn: C, A, G, E, and D, using those as sort of visual guides for shapes. So in other words, let's go back to this octave shape, A on the 5th fret, 6th string. You don't have to jump up here because you have another A here. So you can play this like this to get the 2 octaves. Now if we take that down, and go all the way down to here, that's E to E to E. Those are the 3 E notes that are hiding in a E major or E minor chord. Okay? And so we would call this an E shape octave pattern because it is the open string version of it is connected to, is what the E chords are based on. Hope that makes sense. So we're abstracting out that shape, that E shape. Okay, so there's another octave pattern that you could take around the neck and practice. And getting back to that pentatonic scale, well, that's the bones of that A minor pentatonic scale. Right? So if you practice just those notes, you're training your fingers to jump to those notes, and it's kind of like the bones of the, it's the skeleton of the scale. So you're gonna sound good jumping. Anytime you jump an octave, it's gonna work in the context of a solo, and it's just gonna give you another bass to work out of. So take my word for it that training your fingers to find these octaves in these different positions is really going to, it gives you some place to kind of hang your musical ideas. Okay, now we already looked at the D-shaped one. So this one's the E, and then the D-shaped one would be in the key of A, 7th fret, 4th string, and then I'm jumping up to that pinky note on the 10th fret of the 2nd string. That's the D-shaped pattern. Then the C-shaped pattern is the one that straddles the 2 6th fret patterns we're looking at. So I'm playing in the key of A, I'm playing the 10th fret, 2nd string, and then I'm doubling back to my 3rd finger on the 12th fret of the 5th string. Sorry about that. Okay, so that's the C-shaped. The C-shaped octave pattern. All right. The next one is the A-shaped one. So that's the beginning of the 6th fret pattern that starts on the 5th string. 1st finger to 3rd finger. If we take that all the way down to here, as we saw, it correlates to an open A chord. So that's the A-shaped octave pattern. Okay, that leaves one more, which is the G-shaped octave pattern. So now this one we haven't looked at. From the 6th string, 5th fret, instead of going up to this note, we're going to finger this note with our pinky, and we're going to go down the neck to the 3rd string, 2nd fret. So that's another way. You're playing the same octave, but instead of going from the 6th string to the 4th string and going up the neck, you're going from the 6th string to the 3rd string, going down the neck. The guitar is goofy. Okay? other note in the G shape is this one. We already saw that since we have two E strings, they're going to share notes 2 octaves apart. So this A is 2 octaves above this A. So this G one is pretty goofy. It's a stretch. It's also a really good exercise for your picking hand. Okay, so I like to call that sequence Hopscotch Patterns, because it's kind of like you're hopping around the neck. If I look at it in A, it would look like this. That would be the A pattern, 5th string, 3rd string. Then the G pattern. Then the E pattern. Then the D pattern. Then the C pattern. Then the A pattern. And so on. So I hope that makes sense. I remember being really excited when I discovered this because, again, it really is a pretty powerful skill to be able to play any note anywhere on the guitar. So in other words, I know we just played every single A on the neck up to the 15th fret or whatever. So again, that's a great starting point, because every scale and every chord and everything you learn in the key of A is going to be built on A, among other notes. So it's really, really good to know just with absolute certainty where those notes are, and get them, more importantly, get them in your fingers. So get those shapes in your fingers, right? Because eventually we're going to layer things like the pentatonic scales and all the other scales onto those octaves. We're going to do a few things first, though. And so we're going to build up layer by layer the finger knowledge of, like I said, what the most important notes are. And I would say there's maybe 3 or 4 layers of importance. And the first one is the root note in different octaves. Okay? And it might be kind of amusing to find an A jam track and then see what kind of solo you can play just using, different octaves of A. The best you can hope for really is maybe put a lot of rhythm into it. Or if you have an interesting chord progression, then the trick is just stay on a note and then let the chords change underneath it. And, that'll sound like something. I remember trying to learn an Elvis Presley song, Scotty Moore playing a guitar solo, and I was just starting playing guitar, so my ear was not very good. And that's exactly what Scotty Moore was doing. He was playing basically the same note for the entire solo, but the chords were changing underneath it, so it sounded different. It sounded like he was doing something, and I drove myself crazy. I figured out the first note, but then it sounded like, well, something's changing, so I searched for the other note. Half an hour later, realized that he was just staying in the same place. So that can actually lead to a pretty decent solo. Anyhow, if you have any questions about that, please leave me some questions in the comments, and I hope it helps you out. And I really can't stress enough that I think this is a way to get a foundation that will help you pull together an understanding of the entire neck. Thanks a lot.